All right. So, I mean, of course, I can't expect my man Skip to be here every episode, but if you're gonna have a co-host for any episode, it should be episode one, right? So that's how I feel. So I got my man Skip here. What's up, man?
Yo, in the building, finally getting this thing off the ground, man. It feels good. I appreciate you, yeah, giving me the guest spot, and a co-host spot for, when we can have those schedules align. But
Exactly.
I'm feeling good. Now, to y'all who may know me, you may know me, you may not know me. But if you do know me, if you're wondering, why does he sound a little different? I got my Bane mask on right now, but this is a podcast, so you can't see me. So that's why.
That's hilarious. But yeah, man. So when I decided to float the idea of a podcast around, I recorded like a little zero issue sort of manifesto, right? And Skip was like, hey, if you're starting a podcast, I can do something with a podcast now. And I was like, oh, word, okay. And Skip has been instrumental in pushing me to actually do this and not just make it an idea that just kind of sits around. So I had to give him the guest chair for the first episode. And it's going to be a dope conversation. So today we're just talking about what got us into comics and what keeps us in comics. Because comics can break your heart sometimes.
That's what King Kirby said.
Right. And so it's funny. So I guess I'll ask you first, right? What got you into comics?
Yeah, it was thinking back to it, I can see it pretty clearly. It was definitely my Uncle Ken. Now, really, he's my great uncle, but we simplify things for the youth, right? So when I was younger, and I'm 5 years old, it's just Uncle Ken. Yeah, man, it was definitely my Uncle Ken. He was a comic book head, and as I think back to it, I realize how much really my whole entire family was into comics. My grandmother, was into comics, and she was up here recently. I live in Sacramento, California, although I was born in the land of Mr. Kicks himself, Fayetteville, North Cackalack. So,
or Vietnam, as they say.
Vietnam. See, I don't know nothing about that because I was out of there. I was out of there, but it makes sense though. Military base, pops was in the military, but
Gotcha.
yeah, back on the Cali side of things in Monterey, California, Uncle Ken, but my grandma, she was up here recently, as I was saying, and all of them. It was such a cultural thing back then. It was common for little boys and little girls, to read comics, and to this day. Like my grandma, she likes noir stuff. I get her, Ed Brubaker comics. Her birthday just passed. I got her the process edition of Pulp.
Word.
But yeah, man, Uncle Ken. I was young. If I handle my chores, I get my allowance, and we'd walk up Broadway Street in Seaside, California, Monterey Peninsula, and I go to the corner store, and I could get my Chico sticks. And then I could spin the rack, and I could grab a comic, and then we go home and we read it, man. So that's really where it started. I was between like 7 years old. Yeah. What about you?
Yo, that's funny. You mentioned Chico sticks, just as an aside.
Yeah.
My mom loves Chico sticks.
Word.
For me, I have like an aversion to shaved coconut as a kid. Now it's fine, but for whatever reason, I couldn't do it.
Word.
But anyway, funny, I have like similar story, right? My uncle, so of course I'm from North Carolina, but my family is from New York. And so we would go to New York for the summers, and my uncle Kel, he had a friend. His best friend's name is Ron, and Ron was like the biggest comic nerd. Like I feel like we talk about like blurs and geeks and stuff now,
Yeah.
but like it was a different level then. Like this is mid 90s and stuff. Like Ron was the type to like show you a Japanese sword like at his house, like just. But anyway, so Ron is that type, and it's funny because living here in the South, like you got space, you got room, you got all this stuff, and we had a lot of like amenities. You had video games and stuff because you couldn't like walk to the corner store and do things. Like, it's the suburbs. But going to New York for the summer, we're in this little row house, and ain't really nothing to do. My grandmother didn't have cable. It's like 2 channels you could catch like a music video on, maybe public access stuff. But my Uncle Ron, who was not my uncle, he would bring Rite Aid bags full of comics. And so we would, like, basically every weekend, he would come and like reload the house with comics that I don't know where he was getting them from. Cause even thinking about it now, like, he must have just been like either going through dollar bins, or maybe he even worked at a shop and was just kind of giving us like surplus stuff because there was so much of it back then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he would just drop off bags of comics, and that was like our entertainment throughout the week. And it was just, 90s, basically anything you'd find in a 50 cent bin now.
Yeah.
But like just some of the most outrageous stuff. And for me back then, I was drawing in them, or trying to copy what I saw.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know of any stories that I really remember reading.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'll see a cover and be like, I think I had that one. But yeah, that was my first exposure to comics.
That's dope, man. It's interesting how things like that stick with you as you grow older. And even though we're young, so we're getting exposed to different things as we age and go through life. And and then some things got to take a backseat. So I mean,
Right.
that happened to me with comics when I finally moved up to Sacramento. But it's just interesting to me how important and how much thought went into that stuff, because they were trying to grab our attention, and they manufactured these images that burned into our brains to the point where, you get 20 years later and you see that cover and you have this deja vu. Oh, I've seen that. I probably had that. And I think that is a symbol, if you will, of how deep comics can seep into your bones. And it's beautiful, man. It's very beautiful. For me, like if we're talking about, like earlier stories when I was young, I think it was such a cultural phenomenon that the one that sticks out me with the most, well, really is 2 stories, of course, right? So it's Batman Nightfall and definitely the death of Superman. Those 2 really, really stuck with me. Nightfall was probably the first series where my mom must have, because usually I didn't have money back then. All my comic collecting, it was a bunch of broken runs, because I would get as much money as I can. Uncle Ken or Mom walk me up to the store, and when you hit the spinner rack, like I said, they must have known, these marketing teams and whatnot. They throw these things out and they're like, the one that's flashy, the kid's gonna grab. So I always just grabbed like the flashiest one. So I have, odd issues of Batman and X-Men and all these, different things. But the first run that I remember following the storyline all the way through was Nightfall. And I think my mom just saw how much I was into it. And I don't remember if she just gave me extra money or she just started buying it for me. But that was the first one I remember going all the way through. And Jean-Paul Valley, which, like stuck out to me then. Currently, right now, Jean-Paul Valley is one of the characters that I'm most drawn to for reasons of like faith and different things like that. But it's also cool to just see how the character has transformed. But that, and then of course the death of Superman, and that one I did not collect. But my uncle worked at Costco, and I remember it must have been 6 months after it came out or something, or when it wrapped up. He bought, Costco, you can get everything in bundles. You can get like 37 packs of drawers or, 82 pairs of socks,
Right.
He came home and he bought me the stack, and it was the leading up to it. And then it was the series, The Death of Superman itself. And then it was the aftermath where you had all the different multiple Supermen and, and then everything that happened when he was in the great beyond, if you will. So those are 2 that really burned in my mind when I was younger. But was there any particular story or a character that kind of caught you when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, this is all in the context of the 90s, and it's like every superhero had a TV show, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it was Batman, the X-Men, and Spider-Man,
The
right?
trifecta. That's strong. That's
Right.
a strong base right there.
Yeah, man. And for summers, it was all the cousins. So it's me and my two guy cousins, and we're like just fighting over whatever books Ron brought for the week.
Right.
And so I most often was able to get Spider-Man. The Batman was harder to come by.
Right.
X-Men just depended on what the issue was, right? Because
Right.
everybody loved Wolverine. Nobody had love for like most other people, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's not really a particular story because, like I said, we were mostly just grabbing them for the covers. You might read it one time, but then for me, again, I was an art kid, so it was just about drawing whatever I saw in there. But yeah, some of my favorite covers were almost always Spider-Man covers. But yeah, man, what's funny though is because you've got this experience that's different from mine in that you sort of grew up with comics, right? For me, comics were almost like a novelty, and I only experienced them in my grandmother's house, like during those specific months or whatever. And I come back home and like I didn't see comics in the grocery store or like anywhere really. And I kind of rediscovered comics then as an adult. But I'm wondering, like, have you or did you? Well, I'm sure you have fall out of comics, and then what brought you back in, if so?
Yeah, I did fall out of them. It was I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, but to be more specific and go into it, it was when I moved from Monterey to Sacramento. So Monterey Bay is very beautiful. It's the peninsula. Some people call it the Bay below the Bay. It's about 40 minutes from Santa Cruz, about an hour and 15 minutes from San Francisco. So it's it's very beautiful, but it's very much like a retirement area for the most part because it's fairly expensive, to live there. But Sacramento was a cheaper area in California. It was fairly underdeveloped. It's Northern California, but it's like central. So San Francisco is about an hour and 20 minutes to the west, and then to the east, Reno is about 2 hours. So it's a big city, and it's the capital of California. But when I first moved here, I think it was at a perfect state for me because it wasn't too fast, but it was definitely faster. So as I got up here, the situation kind of changed. And also by that time there wasn't as many like comics on the Spinner X and stuff like that. So when I did go to the stores, you didn't see them as much. The direct market had really gotten a hold of of comic book sales. So you really had to go to a comic book store. So I just kind of fell out just because there wasn't as much availability. I come up here, I start getting into like fashion and skateboarding, and I always loved basketball, but there's more leagues up here, so I leaned into that a little bit more. And then ultimately, like what got me back was I kept my a good amount of my comics from when I was younger. I kept them in the shoebox, and around the time I was around the time I was 26, I was starting a new job at a popular technology company. I'll say that that has a store,
Okay.
and comic book movies. The quality of them had started to rise in popularity and all of that. So I started working at this store, and I think it was about 3 months in. I wore a shirt that had a flash symbol on it, and one of my coworkers called it out, and I was like, "Yeah, you know what's up?" And they were like, "Yeah, are you reading the current run?" And I was like, "Oh no, I haven't really kind of read comics, in a while. I play games that are, comic book related, and of course I watch the movies." But
Right.
and they were like, "Oh, well, me and so 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 and so, we all read here, and we got a hard drive that kind of we circulate." And I was like, "Oh, word, digital comics, yeah, okay." So that hard drive ultimately ended up circulating to me, and So now we're talking. There's a dialogue now, right? Now I am reading that flash run, and then there's conversations going on. That's what got me back in it. And then I was in hook, line, and sinker because by this time I'm making music, producing music. I have experience recording, and and podcasts were not a big thing yet. But I had an iPod, and there was this thing called podcast that I didn't really listen to a lot outside of like my church would upload sermons, and that's how I would like go back through and listen to the sermons later and study and whatnot. So I said, hey, y'all want to like, I got all this audio gear and I got like multiple microphones. Y'all want to like sit down and talk about comics? We can like do a podcast. And they were like, oh yeah. And that's how I got back into comics, and that was also my introduction to podcasting.
Word. That's dope. That's dope. It's funny. So my comic re-origin story, right? All these years later, this is 2019. My daughter, my daughter will be 13 this year, and so anyway, she's like all into art, just like I was as a kid. Except she doesn't just draw; she like paints and sculpts and everything.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right? Like she's dope. She's better than I ever was. So it's cool.
Yeah.
But so anyway, father-daughter bonding. I'm like, all right, well, if she's into art, let me find like an outlet for her. And just happened to see like an ad for a free comic book day event from a local comic shop. And so they're like, oh, we're going to have artists and sculptors and all these things here and free comics and, dollar comics. And I was like, all right, cool. Like, and so I planned this whole day because it was Star Wars Day. And so then the local minor league baseball team, they were having Star Wars night that night. So you go and all the team is wearing like Yoda jerseys and stuff. So, all right, cool. We'll go to free comic book day in the morning. We'll go to this baseball game at night. I'm going to be the dad of the year.
Yeah.
And so we go, and there's cosplayers, there's artists, there's people doing sketch covers and all this different stuff. And she's just loving it. She gets to talk to this dude who like is making little sculpted gargoyle demon looking things. And I'm like, I don't know if I want you making demons, but he's skilled at what he's doing, right? But you know what I'm saying? But anyway, it was a really fun experience for her. And then I go to the little storefront where they got the dollar bin, and it's like I said, all that stuff that just looked like everything I was getting from those Rite Aid bags.
Right.
And I'm like, oh snap. So I grab a bunch of stuff and I'm like, oh, I am a kid again. This is great. Read some of it. I was like, this is straight, but it looks good.
Yeah.
And then, but I followed the store on social media and all that. And then a couple weeks later, they have like this live claim sale. And so I'm like watching the claim sale because at this point, I'm all in. I'm like, this is cool. I know comics still came out. And so I'm looking on YouTube and stuff. People are like, oh yeah, you should get into trades and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the claim sale. I bought like Spider-Man the Other, which sucked as a story, but but anyway, I bought that and I won. It was like, somebody who buys will win this 1 in 200 copy of House of X #1.
Oh.
So I end up winning it's the Dave Cockrum Hidden Gems variant.
Nice.
And I'm thinking it is one out of only 200 copies in the world is what I'm thinking. I'm like, yo, I've won like $1 million. This is great. So anyway, I go to the shop the next week to claim my book that I won. And I'm like, well, I got to get another copy so I can actually read it. I can't touch this one.
Right.
Because it's worth $1 million,
Right, of course.
And right. And so I read House of X #1 and I am hooked. I'm like, yo, this is amazing. And then they're like, oh, you want to subscribe to the series? I'm like, yeah, let's do that. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So now I've got a pull list, which is effectively one book. And but I'm getting House of X and Powers of 10. And it was just the strength of that event or the genius of that event, because comics are monthly by and large, right? Yeah. But House of X Powers of 10 was a weekly event. So you had to go to the shop every Wednesday. By the time the event's over, the habit is formed.
Oh, yeah.
But what's crazy is like, so Ultimate Comics Raleigh, they're still my LCS. I live like 5 minutes down the street from them now. I was about 20 minutes away from them then. Okay. But then I was working at a health insurance company, and there is literally a comic shop that might as well share a parking lot with my old job.
Got you.
And so I hated my job. And so every day on my lunch break, I'm literally walking to the comic shop. And it's like comics don't even come out every day, but it was just, all right, I'm going to come in here, go through these back issue bins and blah, blah, blah. So long story short, I've had a pull list ever since then. And that's what kind of reignited the love for comics. And I mean, it helps that I was also kind of, going through a faith journey, and a big part of it was kind of just stop not watching this nonsense on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And so I loved that comics is like, look, I can control this. Ain't gonna be like no random scene pop up or some inappropriate commercial. Like it's just it's the book I bought, and if I want to pace it, I'll turn the page or not or whatever. So I fell in love with the medium, but then also the stories. It's just been great. I don't know if anything's really hit the highs that House of X has hit. For me, there's been some close things, but they're lucky that they hooked me with that. I guess is that,
Yeah, that was a fortuitous time to come in. Like that was so me being 26 was 11 years ago. So, 2012 I've been back heavy, and yeah, there was, I mean, the closest thing that I had experienced to that coming out was like Secret Wars. But honestly, like as crazy as Secret Wars was, we like Hoxpox, if you will. It was just nuts, man. Every week,
Yeah.
like, man, it was just, I was on 2 different podcasts talking about it, like, 2 different weekly things, just because there was so much hype around that. So yeah, fortuitous time for you to come in. Now the downside, of course, is that, that's not going to be recreated anytime soon,
Right.
So once you get in, and once they hook you and you're in, you also now you kind of got to take stock and find, what can keep you there.
Yeah, man. There are definitely ebbs and flows, but yeah, it's funny though. Like I love comics because again, it's what's on the page. It's a lot of the same thing that kind of attracts me to the podcast format, right? Like we can see each other as we're recording this, right? But whoever's listening, they're just listening. And there's something about that simplicity where it's like it helps you avoid distraction. You're not worried about what's going on in the background. It's not like the music that's helping your emotions. It's just what's on the page and how did they put it down.
It's definitely not the unplanned 2 Black Panther shirts that we have on either, is it?
Right. That is hilarious, by the way. I got to find a way I'll screenshot it so somebody can see this. And you know what? Well, I'll talk about how you can get some extra content here in a minute. But yeah. So I love that it's just simple. It's simple, and especially like I love looking at like process pages. There's something about like just inks over pencils without colors and effects, and I love it. It's just craftsmanship to me.
Definitely. I agree with that, and I align with that. Now, me as someone, I know we had both done music. Obviously, we're both writers. I know, Kix was mic checking, Skip was mic checking. So, both writers, but I do, as much as I love the visuals, I find myself leaning more towards the writing. So I really like to see like scripts and how scripts are put together. But I'm fortunate enough to know some professionals, so I get like a peek behind the veil fairly often. And I do have to say I agree with you, like going and seeing the process, whether it's, the inks, the pencils, or, the colors, and, getting the lettering done, and even, okay, like, seeing the design and different things, and, oh, we're going to try this, we're going to try that. What are we going to do for the back matter? All of that stuff. It is really comic. If you want to see how the sausage is made, comics is probably one of the ones where finding out will still be wonderful, versus like other things where you may be a little let down to find out like how they pulled it off.
Right. Because your favorite rapper's punching in every bar, and they're not even hiding it anymore.
Straight up.
like he's not even finishing his last bar before he comes in with the next one. Like,
People don't breathe because they don't breathe. You're like,
Right.
when did you breathe? You didn't breathe.
Right. But yeah, I love seeing the process. And then, it's funny, I guess. So you came into comics and then almost immediately became, pseudo comics media, right?
Yeah.
And we're in this weird world where like fandom and media is the same. And it's funny because I ended up doing kind of the same thing, right? I read comics for about a year, and then COVID happened, and I was just consuming comics way more in 2020 because we couldn't do anything else, and I liked them anyway.
Right.
And stimulus check, let me buy some more comics, right?
Right.
And then it got to the point where it was like, okay, I'm spending so much time, money, energy on comics that I have to make this make sense somehow. And so it's like, all right, I'll start a YouTube channel. So I've done YouTube, in different capacities in the past and still do. And so I was like, you know what, this will be a cool outlet. I'll talk about something fun for a change instead of like trying to be an educator all the time.
Right.
And that's how I got into, the BJ Kicks YouTube channel. Now comics are dope. And now it's kind of got these branches. It's got this podcast, and we've got the blog and all that. But I think now, of course, like that, I feel like the hobby is solidified for me because being a pseudo member of the media, you just kind of locked in. Your stuff's coming out every week. You're staying on top of the trends. You're staying on top of the news. But then also the benefit is that there's community in an even greater sense, right? Like I'll go to the comic shop once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, see the same 4 or 5 people there.
Yep.
Right. But if I jump on YouTube and do a live stream about how I love Dwayne McDuffie, right? Now I got 12 people coming out the woodworks like, yo, I love Dwayne McDuffie too. I'm never going to find 12 people in the comic shop with that same opinion. And so the community has added such an aspect to my enjoyment of the hobby that, yeah, man, it's been amazing. But how's the community affected your enjoyment of the hobby?
It's affected both sides of it, to be transparent and honest. No, it's definitely one of the main things that kept me in, because the community, the community of the people that I started the podcast with, especially at that time, comics media was just wide open enough to where, like it was really easy to get media for cons. So I'm getting into all these cons for free. And then like cons were a big thing for me and still are. Just like such an integral part of it, but between the interviews. Now I don't really go to cons for, like as media, but back then, like it was awesome, because I was meeting creators and it was interesting hearing their stories of, how some of the things that I liked when I was younger got made and what they're doing now and, all of that stuff. But definitely meeting the people, you can go and people are selling like, Wakanda shirts or whatever, and then you can start talking to them. You can really have an in-depth conversation, and and then the headcanon starts popping off because you got what's on the page, then you got what you imagine in your head, and you trade different ideas. And I never thought about that, or So it's definitely that is a big part of it still to this day. And then you make friends with a lot of the vendors and stuff like that. So now when I go around and I go see Ron Lim, who drew Infinity Gauntlet and Thanos Quest and so many things. And Ron Lim's from Sacramento. Ron Lim knows me. He knows my kids, that type of thing. Justin Greenwood and Ramon Villalobos and, just Chris Marion. There's like all these people. We know each other that, because the creators are down to earth and they're, just how comics are set up. They're kind of the most accessible. It's funny. It even makes me think of Chasing Amy by the old Kevin Smith film where like the movie literally starts like at a local Comic Con, like at a shop and just all of that stuff, man. But then on the flip side, there, especially where we're at now with fandoms and stuff like that, a few times the community was almost why I walked away. I got real down on comics like twice, and it was back to back pretty quick within the last like 5 years. And
Mhm.
you know, it really made me sit down and think like, what, like, why am I feeling this way? Do I want to feel this way?
Mhm.
Okay, once I find that answer out, I'm like, okay, I don't want to feel this way. Do you want to keep reading comics? Yeah, I want to keep reading comics. Okay. Well, what are you going to do about it? What am I going to do to protect and, you know, strengthen my enjoyment and my love, you know, for the medium? And now I've loved comics more than I ever have before. When I was younger and I was in elementary school, you know, you were talking about drawing. Me and my cousin, we made comics, and I
Mhm.
forgot that I ever even did that. We used to write and draw comics, and now I'm coming back around, and that's what I picked that back up again. Now I'm writing scripts and I'm talking to artists, you know, and working on projects. So yeah, the community has gone both ways, you know, with me, but ultimately it's been far more of an asset than a detriment.
Word, word. Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it, so I'll go ahead and just call out the elephant in the room, right? Like
Hmm.
so-called toxic fandoms,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
It's definitely a thing, you know. Part of the reason I started the channel when I did was because I mean I came into comics in 2019,
Hmm.
and it's funny. I was just listening to an interview about you know the the rise of Comicsgate, right?
Hmm.
And as far as I can tell, they say it started around 2015, 2016
Oh yeah, for sure,
ish,
definitely.
right? But when I got into comics again, you're excited about something. So of course, for me, growing up as a Google kid, right?
Hmm.
First thing I do is jump on YouTube, like, all right, who's talking about this thing?
Yeah.
And it was so often that I would come up on a channel and like it'll start off as like a comic review, and then somehow it'll end as like I hate black people, and I was like, whoa, wait, where did this come from? What is
Wow.
happening? Right, right, like, and and it was, and I started to understand some people's grievances with the disruption of status quo,
Hmm.
perceived slights, of their childhood. Like nobody wants their thing attacked, no matter what that thing is,
Yeah.
right? And so you start hearing about these different gripes, but for me, it was just very difficult because on top of having like, perhaps, a valid grievance in some instances,
Hmm.
was just a lot of vitriol
Yeah.
and just crazy rhetoric. And I was just like, yo. And it got to a point where it's like, yo, I don't necessarily want to like be involved in the fandom. Like it's got you questioning, like, all right, if I go to the comic shop, like how are these people like feeling about me in the comic shop? And it was just weird. And so when I started my channel, I was like, you know what? Like even if I don't like a story, like if I don't like a story, I just don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Right. Or I can just, intelligently tell you why I don't like it or what I don't like about it. But there's never gonna be like never gonna hear me like personally attacking an artist or a writer or what whatever.
Right.
I'm all right. This is a podcast. Nobody's listening to this. I'm never gonna sound like Rush Limbaugh talking about a comic book. Like it's
Facts.
never gonna happen, right?
Nah.
But because of that, I think because I just decided like, all right, this is just going to be a positive outlet. I've attracted a fairly positive community,
Mhm.
and that has helped the experience so much.
Absolutely.
Like, and to your point, right, about comic creators being accessible, like it's not like meeting your favorite movie star.
Mm-mm.
Like my daughter was born premature, and Dennis Cowan commented on my Instagram and was like praying for you. And I was like, bro,
Wow.
what?
Wow. That's
Like
amazing.
I'm because I made a video about Static and the Big Bang origin, and he like messaged and was like, yo, I saw your show on Milestone. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see what you think. Right. Like, and it's like, who does that? Like Chris Hemsworth is not like, yo, I heard you really like Guardians of the Galaxy.
Nope.
right?
Nope. Not happening.
Or Thor, excuse me.
Right.
Chris
So,
Pratt's definitely not,
yeah.
same thing, right?
Right.
But comic creators, you know, they do it for the love,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it shows through their work, but it also shows in their interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big part of the reason that I'm here, right? I used to rag on John Romita Jr., right? Like
Right.
I just objectively feel like John Romita Jr.'s best days as an artist are behind him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And his current Spider-Man run, I'm just like, I'm not really feeling this, right? And then I met him. I met him last year,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hanging out with my homie who bought like VIP tickets to see John Romita Jr. So I'm going to get this one book signed. And so we walk up to the counter together. We're talking about the Yankees versus the Mets. He's telling me how his dad used to take him to games. They didn't really have good seats. And then he says to my homie, "Oh, Chris, good to see you again." And Chris is like, "Yo, he remembered me from yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
from the VIP experience. Like, that's amazing." And I was like, you know what? I'll support that man every time I see him.
Absolutely.
Like, because who does that? Who goes out of their way, especially a New Yorker,
Yeah,
right?
especially in New York. Yeah.
Goes out of their way to show appreciation, to learn a fan's name, you know? And here I am thinking, oh, this guy's a jerk because he's charging $28 for an autograph, right? You know?
That's there's a lot there, underneath what you said. There's like a lot of implications within it. These people, you talked about. I've said this multiple times, and I usually say it, or I bring it up if I'm in a conversation with someone and they're talking about, a book that they didn't like from a creator, and they might start to go over the line about how they're talking about them and whatever. And to humanize the situation, to humanize the individual, I usually bring up the fact like, hey, you got to think like this. Most creators do not get paid very well. Most creators do not get paid well. Most creators don't even get paid fairly. The main reason that they're in here doing this is because they love comics. Even if you don't love what they love, even if they don't love what you love and you didn't love their book, when you stop and you think about the facts and you think about the history of comics and the history of creators' treatment within the industry of comics and the business of comics, if they are in here making a book, persevering enough to where that work of art gets published, whether you think it's the best thing ever written or, something that belongs in a commode, it's hard to deny the fact that they love comics.
Absolutely. I mean, we've had these conversations privately, right? But even with getting this podcast off the ground, right? By the time somebody hears this, there's at least 3 episodes. But there's at least a 6-month period preceding this where I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna start this. Right. Like, because this takes an insane amount of time relative to the money that it would bring back in return. Right. Like, I'm lucky if I make $100 a month off my YouTube channel. Right. And I just give the numbers just because, people have these glamorized ideas about what it is that we do. But I know that the return on this is not going to come from money, right? And the reason that anyone is hearing this is because I want it to exist. And I'm willing to sacrifice time. I'm willing to sacrifice hosting fees. I'm willing to, sacrifice the recording budget, all of these things so that it exists in a way that's accessible to people. Right. And that's just me as a commentator. I cannot imagine sitting at a desk days on end, drawing on 11 by 17 paper or whatever size it is. Right. And I could, for what? Like, I have friends. I'm fortunate now to have friends who make comics. And I see the grind.
Oh man.
Like, it's such a grind. And most of them have other jobs. or they're relying on their spouses.
Mm-hmm.
They got ulcers, like they're not treating themselves well.
Right.
They got to
Cramps
worry
and
about health insurance.
arthritis and all of that stuff.
Yeah,
The back's all messed up. Yeah.
right. Like I mean, sheesh, man. Like freaking Peter David.
Oh,
Like
Peter David.
Peter David has written so much that everyone is like, yo, like, I love Peter David. I remember his Hulk. I remember his Spider-Man.
Yeah.
I remember blah, 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 blah. He's having health troubles and has to do a GoFundMe.
Right.
Like, that man's responsible for so many people's childhoods,
Mm-hmm.
so many people's livelihoods. There's a multi-billion-dollar film industry that has him to thank in part for it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And, you know, he's reduced to asking for donations from the community, right? Or waiting for some charity to step in on his behalf. And someone's going to say that he doesn't love what he does, or worse, that he actively hates your favorite character. Like, come on, fam.
Come on, fam. That's
Like,
wild to me, man. It's wild to me. And you know, and to that point, that's why even though I'm paring down, you know, my weekly pulls and stuff like that, trying to save a little extra to buy a house and whatnot, I will perpetually have a like as long as Marvel continues to let him flesh out his corner of the Marvel universe, I will always have a at least one Peter David book on my pull.
right.
Yeah, I mean, like it's heartbreaking that that's the situation that he's in. And I, as someone who has a heart, and maybe I'm a bleeding heart, maybe I am, but I feel so compelled and so convicted to try to support Peter David in any way I can, because the lifestyle that this man sacrificed to be able to express his love and bring joy to people of various ages and races and beliefs and all that stuff is mind-boggling. And the only way he could have persisted to get to this point is love. Nothing else would. I mean, like, because you just don't get paid enough, you know.
Right. I've told people, like, trying to get money out of this hobby is like trying to juice a rock.
Straight up, man. Straight up. I mean, like, I don't even want to think about the amount of money that, and I'll try not to say wasted, because, you know, I've invested, you know, I like the way that I think about comics really is in a support system way. You know, it's like this. I go to Sacramento for whatever reason. We have a lot of comic shops out here, like more than the average place. I have about 10 shops that sell comics within about like 35 minutes of me, and I'm not even talking about headed out towards the Bay. I spread my money around to every single one, with the exception of like 2 or 3, and just because they only do trades. But like, I'm literally trying. Like, I'm a single father raising 2 daughters with, you know, but like, you know, with limited help. And I'm going around like laying myself on the track, trying to like uphold the comic book industry, looking at you and looking, come on, guys, we just got to keep this thing going because we love it.
Right. Like, I mean, we're starting this endeavor, and the idea of this podcast is that you'll pick up this podcast, I don't know, most likely because your favorite creator gets interviewed on it, right? But the idea is that you can listen to any episode and at least listen to a timeless conversation about whatever the subject is, right? Today it's about what got us into comics and what keeps us in it. But tomorrow it might be the impact Peter David had on the Marvel universe, right? And I want this to exist because I want people to feel the joy that we're feeling right now. And I'm committed to doing whatever to the best of my ability to make sure that this is here, right? And so that means, all right, I got to buy a new camera. I got to make sure we have like top of the line production and great value so that people want to watch and want to listen. And it's going to take time. It's going to take effort. It's going to take money. And it's probably not going to return very much unless, I don't know, Marvel hires us because they like our voices, not because
Right.
I don't know, right? But yeah, man, it's a labor of love, but it's really because the comics have given me so much, and I've only really, like I said, I've only really been a fan for about 4 years, right? But it's given so much to me that I feel like I owe it to comics to help it grow, or at least not shrink.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know?
Yeah, no, it's like you said, it's a sacrifice. It truly is. And but hey, obviously, like I said, we feel convicted, we feel compelled. There's others that do too. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we're just trying to keep the fire lit. Like if that's all that we accomplish, if that's all that you accomplish with it is to keep the fire lit, it really goes beyond monetary value. I can honestly, the comics that I find myself enjoying the most are the comics that penetrate, you know, deep down to the root
Mm-hmm.
of who I am. I
Yeah.
can, of course, I read comics that are a little more surface, and I'll read Pink Lemonade, and it's just like
Right.
a innocent little book. I can get down with that, but it's the fact that these things can have such a lasting effect on me, and then they can roll into relationships, me getting to know you, Bunkmaster B, SSI
Mm-hmm.
Rook, and Vire, and so many people in
Mm-hmm.
the Discord, and various other people part of the squad that the squad formerly known as the Kicks, the Kick
Right.
Squad.
Okay. Squad.
But all of those things, I as a responsible adult, I have to manage how much time I
Mm-hmm.
spend with it. I have to budget how much time and money I spend on it. But as a person going through this human existence called life, there
Mm-hmm.
is it's invaluable. And some creators and some people will never know how much it means to me to have this. And
Right.
for that reason alone, I find myself here.
Exactly. Exactly. So look, man, this has been a great conversation. Skip and I can talk for hours. We've done it before. But I hope that you understand, the passion that we bring to this. And that we're not trying to sell you, or we're not trying to sell you anything. You listen to this for free. Absolutely, but we're not trying to, I don't know. There's so many. We're in this weird like influencer world, and it's like everybody's trying to like have some sort of a status so they can get something. We really are just trying to provide a platform, not because no platform exists, but because we just want to like spread the love a little bit, for comics that are dope to receive that recognition. And we just add our little bit to the zeitgeist. So anyway, this is as good a manifesto as I could create, as to why this exists and what we hope you get out of it. I'm hoping that by the time you listen to this, or maybe you listen to us or read a story that we recommend or something, that you're just as passionate about it as we are. That's the goal: creating dope fans and connecting people with books that are dope. So this has been the first episode of the Comics Are Dope podcast. Hopefully, timeless commentary on timeless stories. Now, if you like your comic book information a little bit more timely, you're like, yeah, this is cool. I love classic Jack Kirby, but what's happening right now? You should subscribe to the newsletter. It's called This Week in Comics. It's where I will break down a few issues that came out this week, what I thought about them, as well as a few recommendations for books that are on final order cutoff that you might need to check out before they become scarce. So you can go to thisweekincomics.com to sign up for that newsletter. And you can find us everywhere online at Comics Are Dope and at comicsaredope.com. Skip, where can they find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter sometimes at Skipntosh, Skipntosh. You can also find me live streaming, usually at least once a week. Right now, currently going through Jonathan Hickman's Marvel library at twitch.tv/Skipntosh. You probably can't find me on Apple Music or on Bandcamp, but I say give it a try, because if you do, you might get a little reward. But the place that you can find me the most is in the Comics Are Dope Discord server, serving it up, I'm trying to elevate my mod status. I'm just waiting for Kicks to like give me a role where I can do like a few more extra things to help him out. But in the meanwhile, I'm up in there talking my head off, holding down the #1 spot. I think I'm like a million levels ahead of everybody else. So try to come catch me.
Yeah, Skip's got all the XP points in the Discord. So yeah, join the community. All the links are in the show notes. Yo, thank you. If you are listening to this, especially if you're listening to this day one, you are a real one. I appreciate it no matter when you're listening to this. By the way, I don't know what you're reading. I don't know if you read a comic book today or if you're going to read one tomorrow. And I don't know what it's going to be, but whatever it is, I hope it's dope. And we'll talk to you soon.